Peace. What's happening, good people? This gift here for Pay Us No Mind, and we're taking a look at the Spotify for Artists tab audience. All right, that audience tab, which shows you listeners, streams, follows, things of that nature. So let's dive into it, y'all. Now, in this tab, you can monitor growth. So you can see whether you're getting more listeners and whether you're getting more streams. Now, these things, sometimes you can get more streams without getting more listeners. So it's like if you come out with a new album and your pre-existing listeners are streaming an album of like 20 songs or whatever at the same time that they still are listening to the previous releases the same amount of time that they was before, then you will get an escalation in streams without getting an escalation in the number of listeners because it's the same listeners. So you don't always get more listeners with more streams. So that's something that you want to pay attention to when you're trying to identify whether your audience is growing. If you get an increase in streams without an increase in listeners, or your increase in listeners isn't comparable to your increase in streams, then that tells you that hey, your music, the people you reach is not growing as much as you think it is. So that's like even with when you're advertising and you're promoting your music and you come in Spotify, because a lot of people just look at this metric. How many streams am I getting? They kind of ignore the listener metric. But, you look and you say, okay, well, I advertised, I spent this much money, you got 20 people listening, and these 20 people are accountable for like all of these streams, and it's like, you might be like, oh man, I got so many fans. And it's like, nah, you don't really have a whole lot of fans. You have a few people who listen a lot, which is still very valuable. So that means that effectively, it might mean that your campaign worked better because sometimes less is more, in the sense of quality. But you definitely want to keep an eye on it, man. So you look at your streams and you see, okay, well, how many more streams am I getting now than I was previously? You could compare and see, if you want to export this, you can. Somebody like myself, I will export it, drag it into a data visualizer, and do things like compare the average number of daily listeners from 1 week to the average number of daily listeners to the next week or whatever have you, to see, how much am I averaging, not just like spikes, but how much is the average. Followers tells you whether the people who are listening to your music are into you enough to actually follow you, to be able to have your music served up to them on release radar and stuff. It's a passion metric. It's not a lot that Spotify does with the follow thing, but it indicates how much someone is into you. Not just that they like your song, but they like you as an artist. So you can have people who like your music but aren't that big of a fan of you. But if people like your music and you, then, you could have a much more dedicated fan than if you just had somebody who liked your song. Now, similar to the issue with the save rate, your follow rate can be off in a sense that the people who are listening to your music could be people who already follow you. So what you want to look at and see, okay, well, how many followers do you already have? And how many listeners do you already have? So it's like, or how many listeners do you have? So, you could technically just eliminate the number of followers that you have from the number of listeners you got to try to get to a more realistic metric or a more realistic ratio of followers. But at the same time, maybe those people who are listening aren't followers. So that's just something that you don't know. You don't know whether these listeners, whether these 770 listeners that he has right here are followers. So to eliminate all of the followers from this pool as if they're all listeners would probably be inaccurate, because maybe his listeners, maybe 10% of his listeners is streaming his music. We don't know. And that's another thing about Spotify. They do not allow you to dig into data for followers. So we can't go and see, okay, well, how many of the followers are listening to the music? You know, how often are the followers listening to the music? So you can't see, okay, well, amongst the people who say they care about me the most as an artist, how many streams do I get per listener there with those groups of people? You can't see that. Now, source of streams we went over, you know, listeners, gender, listeners' age. Again, these are metrics that would be far more important if you could isolate the people who are streaming from listener libraries and personal playlists and followers and things like that. If you could isolate this metric and say, amongst my followers or amongst the people who are streaming my music from their libraries and personal playlists, what gender are they? What age are they? Because this right here is just blanket coverage. So it's like you get on Discover Weekly, you get on Release Radar, all these discovery-based playlists. These are not people who are fans of your music, but these metrics would be dictated by those things. So this does not tell you what gender and age your fans are. This just tells you the age and gender of the people who are streaming your music, which could be people who don't care about your music all that much. Listeners also like is something that you get once Spotify understands who you are ranked as similar to. So this is where targeting comes in play, and this is also where the style of music you do and consistency with the style of music you do come in play, because some artists are eclectic and they're all over the place, and that's where that fragmentation hurts you. So if an artist comes in and one song is a rock song, another song is a rap song, another song is a spoken word piece, all of these different styles of music, then Spotify says, okay, we don't know who this guy ranks as similar to. He's got rock people listening to his music. He's got hip hop people listening to his music. None of them are listening to it enough to kind of like overpower anything and make you be like, oh, wow, yes, hip hop. That guy's in that wheelhouse. So just confuses the algorithm and you end up with nothing, you know, and this is where people make the argument about how Spotify does not serve certain types of artists well, because artists who are more artistic and who are effectively more so like they can't be pigeonholed. They don't make a style of music that you can just be like R&B, you know, like they just make creative music that can fit nowhere. You know, it's just too original. It's too original. And if somebody is too original, then they're not gonna get a listeners also like, because there's nobody else that they rank as similar to, which means that it's going to be harder for them to get on radio stations on Spotify. It's going to be harder for them to get on this, not Discover Weekly playlists, but playlists that are built around styles of music and stuff like that. It's just going to be harder for them to really infiltrate the system, because the only playlist they're going to get on is those eclectic playlists that are just based around user listening patterns and or like the personal listening patterns. So they'll get on personal algorithmic playlists that serves the purpose of reinforcing music to a pre-existing listener, but they won't get on those playlists that are aimed at discovery, because Spotify won't know who would want to discover your music, because those playlists are aimed around this guy listens to this guy and this guy, so this guy he might like too, you know. United States, right? The top countries, again, is a metric you would want to isolate with the people who are streaming your music from personal libraries and followers, because that would tell you where your fans are. This just tells you where the streams are coming from, but it doesn't tell you where the people who love the music are coming from. Same thing with cities. So you can't isolate and identify where your fans are. You can only identify where the streams are coming from. And like I said before, if the numbers are astronomical and they're big, you can say, okay, you know, well, it has to be some people there that like me. And again, if the numbers are huge, even a small percentage of a big number is going to be a big number. So you can still go to any city that is on that list and do and perform and do well. But if the numbers aren't like massive, then it becomes more important for you to understand who your actual fans are. You don't want to pack up and go to a city and not have anybody come out because it was just discovery-based streams and not like actual fans that love your music and care about you as an artist, you know? So, yes, with the Spotify for Artists dashboard, there's areas where it's okay, it's good. They give you metrics. They allow you to see that you're getting listeners, you're getting streams, you're getting followers, you're getting saves, you know, save ratio, follow ratio, things of that nature. But where they fall short is allowing you to identify fans and where your fans are and your age, the age of your fans, and you know how the effectiveness of the playlist that you get on and the discovery playlist and whether those people are safe. Like you can't really identify things like that, you know, which is not so great. And for that, you would need your own independent setup, right? Your own website, looking at your social media stats, things like that to identify where your actual fans are coming from. So if you guys want to hit me up, you can at Payusnomind on Instagram, at Payusnomind on Twitter, payusnomind@gmail.com. This is Gift signing off. Payusnomind. Peace, good people. One.